So, how on earth do you sharpen a serrated knife? Guys, this is Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist, and this is a topic that was brought up in one of my previous videos. Before I go on, remember that if you're interested in survival and preparedness, you have the channel with a ton of information. Subscribe. You have the button over there. Click the notification bell button so as to be told of future videos that I'm uploading. And if you want to learn more about all of this, you have 3 survival skills and surviving the economic collapse, my books available in Amazon in the links there below if you're interested in these topics. So the question is, how the hell do you sharpen your serrated knife? Well, let's start by saying don't buy a damn serrated knife. It's a saw, it's not a knife. If you notice, most manufacturers don't offer a ton of serrated blades. It's usually the lower end, the cheapest crap that has serrated blades. Now, I'm not saying that there's not quality manufacturers that also make serrated knives, but it's usually going to be an extremely small part of their production that they dedicate to such a thing. And usually it is the case that the higher end the brand is, the more quality knives they make, the less prone they are to insult all of that work with a serrated edge. Again, having said that, there are manufacturers that are very high quality, very respectable, that have used serrated edges here and there. Why am I explaining this? Because you should not buy a serrated knife. It makes no sense. I have a couple, but if you compare the amount of knives that I have with serrated edges with the amount of knives that I have with a straight edge, just like 1%, maybe not even 1% of the knives I have a serrated edge. Well, it doesn't make any sense. Why is it that these things exist in the first place? Well, most people have seen a serrated knife in their kitchen, right? That's probably what you use for eating every single day. But there's a reason for that. When you have a steel knife that is going to be making contact all day long with a ceramic plate, if that knife is a normal knife, right, you're going to be ruining all of that edge. This ceramic plate is going to be a lot stronger, a lot harder than the steel in your knife, no matter what knife you have. It's not going to be as hard as ceramic. You're basically talking about, cutting on top of a piece of rock or the cement floor. That's the thing you do to destroy knives, not to use them. And yet still, that's what we do every single day. So that's why we have serrations. What is it that serrations do? Well, if you add serrations to this thing, you will notice that a couple interesting things happen. First of all, my knife is no longer touching that ceramic plate. It's only going to be this point, and this point, and this point, maybe this point, the ones that make contact with that horrible hard surface. This means that this is going to be dented and blunt and ruined while retaining the inside of that curve, of that serration. That's not going to be making contact with a plate. That means it's going to be kept sharp a lot more. But besides that, because of the way in which a serration works, whatever material that gets in there is going to be dragged directly against the edge. That's the function of a serration. That's why saws cut. You're basically forcing little bits of material in that straight line against it. And that usually cuts quite well. It's not going to be cutting as neatly or as nicely or as cleanly as a nice straight edge, but it's going to cut. It's going to saw through crap, right? And that's usually what people want when eating. They don't want to bother too much thinking about all of these things. This is why serrations even exist at all. Now, why is it that in some knives, in some models, it has been incorporated? Well, a lot of it is kind of like marketing. For example, this is a knife I actually carried a lot, and I hated the guts of these serrations, but it was the only thing that was available at the time. I wanted the recurve blade, I wanted this shape, and if I could, I would have bought it without the serrations. But it is true that it has some advantages, even though it has a lot of disadvantages as well. A sharp straight edge is always going to be better than this, except for very few, except for like when cutting through hard plastic or wood or some sort of stuff, but it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Having said that, there are times in which you may want to have a serration, especially if that knife is going to be used by people that don't know a damn thing about knives. That's a case in point of some of the military knives that you have. Not all of them these days, you don't find many, but some of those K-bars that have a little bit of serrations there, like close to the, right? Some of the, I think that K-bar makes a model, or some of that has a bit of serrations here, right? Just a little bit of serration. Why is that? Well, because these guys don't even know how to sharpen a knife. Most of the troops that will be using knives have no freaking clue on how to sharpen a knife. They could not care less. They don't know how to do that. So they will end up with a knife that is not sharp enough. And if it happens that you still need to cut through something in spite of that knife not being sharp anymore, we default back to our serrated kitchen knife. You have those teeth, and if you do enough force with it, you'll kind of rip through stuff. It's also true that for some things, for example, for cutting through rope and some of that stuff, some of those serrations can be quite handy for that specific sort of thing. Again, a sharp straight edge still gonna be better, but it is true that sawing through some tough cordage can be advantageous in certain situations, especially with a knife that is not particularly sharp. I insist on this thing: avoid serrated edges at all costs. They make no sense in a proper outside of this, right? Outside of eating on a ceramic plate, or outside a little bit of serration in a soldier's knife, right? Makes no sense, because it's always going to be better a straight edge. That's why most quality manufacturers make most of their models with straight edge. That's why some of the top best brands in the planet don't even bother with a serrated knife. That's kind of like, it is a point of, yes, Victorinox, they have that. In what model do they have it? They have it in the soldier model, of course. For a soldier, this makes sense. A soldier will have his soldier Victorinox. He will never sharpen it. He has no clue how to do that. But hey, if I have to saw through crap, I have some serrations. And they even leave you a little bit of a straight edge, exactly where it's going to be more beneficial for that, push cutting thing. But that's why you sometimes have some of these, half-half. This for all of the tough crap that is a little bit harder to cut. You have somewhat of a saw here going on, and then you have a little bit of a straight edge. Okay, having insulted the precious possession of many of you guys with your glorious serrated knives, how is it that you sharpen the damn thing? Well, it is a gigantic pain in the ass. But there are a few things you can do, and keep all of this in mind. First of all, if you buy something from a quality manufacturer, usually they will have some sharpening implement that is intended to sharpen those serrations. It's not going to be all manufacturers, but most manufacturers are serious about this sort of thing. They will have some sharpening tool for their serrations. If not, well, you will just have to get by. But first line of defense when it comes to sharpening serrated knives, check your manufacturer and make sure they don't have already something that's already designed for sharpening those serrations. Look at these damn things from Cold Steel. These are a nightmare. I never sharpened one of these. But look at this. And this knife I have used, and I've always been super wary of using this part, because how the hell do you sharpen that? You will need something very specific. These are like needles. And there you have like a more normal kind of serration. That's going to be a little bit easier to sharpen. But hey, so that would be the first thing. Find the proper sharpener for that specific blade edge that you have, that serrated edge. That not being possible, the second thing that I recommend doing is understand how this was made in the first place. It's usually going to be one-sided, right? It's usually going to be, if you cut this like so, you will have this section, right? It's going to be a section like that, straight here and that, right? There you go. So this, if you cut it in, and you see, you can appreciate how it's basically flat. This seems to have like a little curvature here, but for most practical purposes, it's very flat on this side and sharpen on this side. So this means that one of the things you can do is, with a sharpening stone, or even one of these nail buffers that I often mentioned in previous videos, you can put the blade flat as it is and then give it a minimal angle and drag it against. With just the smallest possible angle, drag it a little bit. Yes, there's no there's no such bevel here, but what you're doing is basically sharpening that apex on this side where it hasn't been worked, so any kind of deformation should not even be there. And by giving it a little bit of an angle, you're meeting that apex a lot nicer. This means that you will have a chance of putting somewhat of a decent edge back in that thing. I've done this many times with these sort of knives, or even with kitchen knives or bread cutting knives, and just dragging it at a little bit of an angle, you usually bring back a decent edge. That being said, the third thing you want to look into is try finding a file or something that adjusts to those serrations and work on those. Now, this is kind of like a bit of a nightmare. Victorinox, well, they do have their sharpening pen, and it has an angle that could kind of fit in there. So then what you would be doing is finding where it fits with each one of these, right? It has a little bit of a curvature, and you go working each freaking teeth one by one. You work on that thing, right? You sharpen it individually, and then maybe a little bit of a pass here, and that's voila. You have a sharp, horrible serrated edge yet again to continue torturing all of us true knife aficionados. But that would be the thing. Find a file. This probably works for the Victorinox serrations, and you work on that each time. There are a number of sharpening stones or diamonds, pens, and so on. Find something that fits and start working on it. And a final touch on the other side, creating a minimal little angle there so as to touch it up, and that's it. The last thing I would recommend doing is just ignore the damn thing and sharpen the knife as you normally would. Yes, you are going to be eating up those serrations, and hopefully one day they will be a bygone memory of something that shouldn't have existed in the first place. But you can just, this blade, stone, you start working on it, both sides. You will not sharpen the inside of each serration, but you will bring back a decent edge, and eventually it will be closer and closer to that center, and it will cut. Even it's not going to be sharpening perfectly the inside as you would when you sharpen each serration individually. You're still going to be putting an edge on those little peaks, on those little tips that are usually where the edge has been lost the most. All right, that's it, guys. That's the best advice I have for when it comes to serration. One final thing that you may try doing is with sandpaper, very fine. Try finding on a piece of wood, wrapping it around, maybe on an angle, on a 90-degree angle. Find something that kind of fits in there, and with a lot of patience, drag that piece of wood with a little bit of sandpaper on each of those and try to bring back the edge. That's as best as you can do, but as you see, the point is avoid serrations as much as you can. Folks, see you on our next video. Take care.